Hey everyone, Sumo Spiffy here. Welcome to the tier list recap for the Return of the Kings, aka Sumo's July 2026 Basho. This is, as always, our follow-up to the pre-tournament tier list. If you're new to these, we don't just recap how the wrestlers did, but also the predictions made by myself, our community, and another sumo content creator, in this case the esteemed Sumo Jason. You'll see our predictions in the bottom right, along with how many we've gotten correct. And we keep score because if either Jason or the community beat me, I give money to the charity of their choice. With that said, 42 guys and one hell of a basho is a lot to cover, so let's dig in. Let's get the injured folks out of the way. Wakatakakage, of course, suffered a case of compartment syndrome in his left leg a week before the tournament. This condition, given the nature of the sport and his age, is potentially career-ending, so of course he's expected to be back in November. As much as going out with a Yusho was a pretty good mic drop, that only tends to be the case if you go out willingly, so hopefully those estimates are correct and he won't need another tour in the lower divisions. Then there's Wakanosho. This was very depressing to see, not just because he's a good young wrestler, but because he was steamrolling everybody in sight. It looked like a knee ligament injury in the moment, but was diagnosed as a right femoral bone contusion. I've never encountered that, so I can't speak to how athletes have recovered from it in the past, but if there's genuinely no ligament damage, that has to be a good thing long term. Hopefully he'll be back in September with minimal lasting effect. As for Hoshoryu, he did drop out, but with 13 matches completed, it makes more sense to slot him into the recap normally. Okay, next up, Rikishi, where all three parties made the same prediction. Kirishima. You gotta hand it to Kiri. It's pretty tough to have 3 consecutive 12-win bashos and be a disappointment, but he's pulled it off magnificently. This is precisely what a sizable number of people pointed out when Kiri was officially placed on Yokozuna watch. Whether the expectation was a 13-2 or a 14-1, Kiri does not hold it together well enough to make either of those happen. And in the last 3 bashos, he's blown his shot at something better than 12 wins 3 different ways. In March, he dropped Day 2 to Churanoumi, which seemed to make him realize he has work to do, and he ran the table to 12-1. Then he lost to Aonishiki, normally fine but this was the busted foot version, and was insanely fortunate Hoshoryu bumbled the Yusho away before Kotozakura came to play on Day 15. May, he sprints it to 7-0 and sole possession of the lead, which is a fairly rare thing to have less than halfway through the basho. 3 days later, he shat himself into a 6-way tie. He got the lead back, was again in the driver's seat, and lost to friggin' Hakunofuji with only Maegashira opponents left on the schedule. Then, with a chance to cement a solid start to a Yokozuna run, he clown-assed the playoff against Wakatakakage despite beating him in regulation. And now this catastrophe where he never had more than a tie for the lead in July. That, in and of itself, wasn't the issue so much as it happened due to 0-4 Hiradoumi dropping him, then Churanoumi a few days later. The latter loss was arguably worse since he should have been able to look at their last match and figure out a plan. His Yokozuna run is still alive because Atamifuji dragged him into a playoff, but that just turned into a showcase for how much better than him both Atami and Aonishiki were. Atamifuji and Aonishiki aren't the issue though. Holding serve, so to speak, against his Maegashira opponents would almost certainly be enough to finally hit 13 wins and, probably, become a Yokozuna. Of course, that's easier said than done. Guys lose matches to opponents they normally wouldn't in every basho. But the Yokozuna title is right there, and the fact he can't find a way to level up for just one tournament is exactly why they're being stringent with what will get him the white rope. And all of us knew it would happen. Now I'm all out of vitriol, but there's plenty of time to build it back up before we get to Onokatsu, so let's move on to Abi. 7-8 was on the low end of what we all expected, but not unreasonable. Here's the problem. This is what I'd expect if his arms were a mess and he had to win primarily through footwork or off-brand maneuvers, but his pushing looked fine. Not prime Abi level, but he was giving opponents a hassle all the way through. This is how he dropped from 5-3 to 5-7. Shishi, at his best, is capable of holding his distance, so okay, fine. He pulled a nice henka on Kotoeiho that Koto reversed beautifully. He had Daieisho at the edge, but didn't quite have the juice to finish before Daieisho slipped away, and Asakoryu had a picture-perfect henka to finish the run. His final loss to Fujiseiun, he was jamming Fuji's head back something serious, but Fuji held on with those pushes under the arms that we've talked about recently with Churanoumi. The fact this version of Abi still exists should be good, but this Abi not running over the bottom of the division makes him an even bigger question mark in September. Gonoyama. Before the Basho, I posited that Gonoyama would struggle to find the balance between aggression and control. I might have been looking at it the wrong way. At this level, he may not have the force he needs to beat some of these guys without being over-aggressive, which means there's no real balance to be found. That sounds like a wild statement, but Atami, Kirishima, Hoshoryu, even Churanoumi faced him up pretty effectively in power despite push power being his whole game. In terms of performance, I think this is the best he's done at this level. I'm not sure where any noticeable improvement compared to this is supposed to come from, but even spinning his wheels at Maegashira 2 or 3 would be quite a boost compared to 2024 and 2025. Ichiyamamoto. In the recap, we like to discuss things of note. Ichiyamamoto beat Kotoshoho in a belt fight and showed some real proficiency at it in the process. That's about it. Otherwise, a very Ichiyamamoto basho. Yoshinofuji. Okay, a guaranteed winning record was maybe a little optimistic, but any prediction under 7 to 9 wins would have been hard to justify. This basho wasn't great from the start though. Taking advantage of his unreal ability to stomp both Onosato and Aonishiki got him off to what looked like a good start, but to do that in the first week and still find yourself at 3 and 4 is not a good sign. Even so, taking down Hoshoryu to reach 5 and 4 should have been a springboard to something better. Instead, after getting blown out by Gonoyama and horrendously frustrated by Churanoumi, he tried taking out all his frustrations on Hiradoumi. All that did was open him up to Hiradoumi's counterattack. Kotoeiho's contender status got his head right for a day, but that couldn't save him from an inglorious end to his Sanyaku debut. Apparently what I took away from May, that the Sanyaku has the tough matches but we can expect him to be strong against Maegashira opponents, may not be as true as I thought. If this basho was the aberration, he'll have plenty of chances in September to prove it. Kotoeiho. The first thing I wrote for Kotoeiho was that he definitely wants that loss to Shishi back. Then I wondered if it was true. If he'd beaten Shishi, he still may have faced Takerufuji, but his other fight in the last 2 days would have been far tougher than Asanoyama. 11 and 4 was probably where he'd finish either way. Even if he was guaranteed the same record though, I think he'd rather have won. That would have kept him in the Yusho race at least through day 14, like in May, and most guys don't get that many chances to compete for a title. He's probably gonna find that out in September, but damned if he hasn't put on a show since March. A show that nobody expected to continue at this level. Daieisho. Daieisho spent the first half of the basho mostly using mobility with a frisson of push to swing a 5 and 1 start. That basically stopped working for 5 days, and lo, he was only 6 and 5. Then a miracle happened. Push came back. Real push. Daieisho push. Push that says, "Get the fuck out of here!" His mobility was still there, but for those last few glorious days, it didn't look like a necessity for him to succeed. Daieisho, real Daieisho, our Daieisho had returned. A few days are not a whole basho, of course, so we'll see where he's at come September, but I don't think anyone minded missing this pick. Alrighty, next are the many wrestlers where we had different picks, but everyone was right, or everyone was wrong. Kotozakura. Boy, this sure would have been more interesting if Koto had lost to Shishi, huh? Hakunofuji. How to go from Yusho contention to complete meltdown to getting carried into the Sanyaku. He started 7 and 2 with those losses to Aonishiki and Onosato. I mean, this thing couldn't have started better. He loses to Kirishima, okay, still at the edge of contention. Works his ass off against Takayasu, but takes a loss that effectively ends his Yusho hopes. Unfortunate, but 7 and 4 is still good and can be a springboard to a strong finish. Then he looks fully, like 100% checked out in getting run through by Takanosho and Gonoyama. Beating Churanoumi got him to 8 and 6, but the final match was quite possibly to determine if he'd make his Sanyaku debut. And he got Oho. Yes, according to how the schedule gets made, he was next in line to fight Oho, but the JSA absolutely could have shifted them to more interesting matchups. He owes someone a beer. Hopefully someone who won't chuck it at his head. Asanoyama. Recent Asanoyama history. January, hits 9-3, loses his last 3 fights. March, goes 8-4, loses his last 3 fights. May, 7-3, gets knocked out for the last 4 days, thank you Tobizaru. Now July, 8-2, loses 4 of his last 5 with the only win over the one struggling wrestler in the group. You call it a pattern, I call it blessed consistency. Fujiseiun. Not all 7 and 8s are created equal. He started great in May, got rolled by tougher competition after a couple goofball losses, but still had a chance at a winning record before Hakunofuji got him on the final day. July looked similar on paper, 7-7 but blowing the winning record on day 15. But that was with wins over Mitakeumi, Tobizaru, and Ura, all of whom were staggering through the tournament. More damning were the losses to Wakamoto Haru and Shodai given what kind of shape they were in. Not turning all that into 8 wins means my positive vibes going into the basho are much more neutral vibes coming out. But we do like them points. Churanoumi. Kirishima's nightmares are gonna be Churanoumi and Hiradoumi tag teaming to beat his ass across the whole city of Nagoya. Other than that win though, everything we saw from Chura was in line with expectation, including there being a whole bunch of dudes up top who are barely annoyed by his best efforts. But he's getting more comfortable with going for the face, so maybe he'll start finding an extra win here and there. Oshoma. Oshoma's streakiness is turning into legend. In 2026, with 59 matches fought, he's gone win-loss-win or loss-win-loss 3 times. That's it. On the flip side, he's got 4 streaks of 3 or more wins and 6 streaks of 3 or more losses. Hell, this basho, the only time he broke that habit was with his first win ever over Tobizaru, which speaks more to how trash Tobi was. He drops that, it's another 4-loss streak. Who he fights or how they're doing doesn't seem to matter much either. I feel like I should have some way to roast him for this, but it's so baffling, all I can do is look at the strings of black and white and be amazed. Asahakuryu. I gave up on this guy. I got no problem admitting that. 2-7 start, only beat Mitakeumi and Oshoma in the midst of their own nightmare bashos? Trash bags, dog water. Then when he has to fight Yusho contender Shishi in a match where he's absolutely being set up to fail, he completely blows out Snaggletooth and it's like he remembered he's good at this. Usually we save the term head case for guys who only seem to lose due to bad mental. Asahakuryu at least has upswings, but he's looking like a good reason for sumo stables to start hiring sports psychologists. Hoshoryu. Someone left a comment on the Instant Banzuke about Hoshoryu being such a disappointment as a Yokozuna, and I get it after watching this basho. I will note, however, that he started taping up his right leg after the loss to Hakunofuji on day 6. After that, Hiradoumi and Daieisho were wins he shouldn't need to be 100% to get, and then the whole thing fell apart. Trust that I'd let rip if he just looked bad, but the JSA was on his ass for the hamstring pull that took him out of May, and this looked like he preferred the appearance of battling through injury than dropping out until it was clearly necessary. Sucks because if we'd gotten day 1 Hoshoryu for the whole tournament, the Yusho race would have looked a lot different. Atamifuji. I mean, holy shit. Jason went super optimistic with his prediction and still somehow undershot the mark. I don't care how much you believed the Atami we'd seen up to this point in 2026 was the real and permanent version, no one saw this coming. Believed it was possible, sure, but gun to head, no one's banking on this. And yet, not only did he went full Godzilla. It didn't look like a one-time thing, it looked like an every-time thing. The sport is too loaded to say he's definitely going 12-3 again in September and making Ozeki, but now it would be stunning if his performance crashed to where we wonder why we ever thought it could happen. Takayasu! Healthy Papa Bear doing healthy Papa Bear things. I've said this before in past situations where Takayasu dropped to the mid-ranks. It's easier to stay healthy over the course of a basho because the guys at this level simply don't pressure the body the same way they do at the top. It may not be a huge fall off, but it's enough to matter. Plus, Takayasu was so controlled and picked his spots so well that he didn't have to abuse himself grinding out physically demanding wins day after day. All of us were a little too concerned about his injury history to hope for 11 wins, but it was always possible. Takerufuji. Bro, get your arm fixed. That might sound weird given he had a hell of a basho, but Onosato and Aonishiki showed how much easier it is to beat this Takerufuji if you're able to withstand or avoid his underhooks. It's a great attack, and it's fine if he's content with hanging around the mid-ranks, but anyone following the sport in early 2024 remembers Takerufuji with actual champion capacity, and it ain't coming back if this is all he can do. Shishi! As for the other guy who started 10-2 and lost his last 3, it's more fun with him because it was more surprising. But he got a decent position against Kotozakura, and Koto showed just how not ready for the top of the division Shishi is. I think I gotta do a Shishi breakdown next because I'm tired of being confused by him. Roga! 2 straight 9-6 records. The meme might be dead. And it's remarkable because even though his 3-6 start got him matches against other struggling opponents, Shodai and Ura are guys he was 0-8 against combined coming in. He didn't get a cakewalk finish either, catching Asakoryu and Shishi the last 2 days. I'm reluctant to say his performance was much different than expected because he looked like Roga, but maybe he gets the breakdown after Shishi? Nishikifuji! Alright, fuck it, I'm just flipping a coin before each basho to decide whether Nishikifuji will look healthy or not. Sick of this fucking guy. Ura! Pfft, I don't know, man. 1-6 start. He turned it around to 4-6, and if he'd kept that going to a decent record, the start might not seem like that big a deal. But success for Ura requires the ability to get enough straightforward wins and to only need trickery for a few. Of those first 7 guys, Oshoma and Ichiyamamoto are the only ones I think he can consistently beat without drawing on his magic reserves. He did catch some tough fights near the end, relative to his performance up to that point, but even a friendlier schedule makes this a 7-8 basho at best. Not quite the upside anyone was hoping for. And yet, Ura still looked better than Tobizaru, all things considered. Ura did his thing but got overwhelmed too often. Tobi just got beat by basically everyone who could defend himself. The question coming in was whether that marginal Yusho run in May was a one-off, and we sure did get an answer. Hiradoumi. Well, I guess I don't have to feel dumb about picking Hiradoumi to get 6 wins on the low end rather than 5 because he couldn't even do that much. Basically, everyone up top looks like they've got a handle on him, plus Daieisho is healthier and Atamifuji's done being anyone's whipping boy. It'll be fun watching September as he takes on a bunch of guys who haven't seen much of him, but Hiradoumi epitomizes I'm gonna do my sumo, and little man face smash ain't gonna cut it up top anymore. Oh-ho! You know what? I'm not saying anything mean here. He had a leg injury and was a tiny fraction of his normal self. My main critique would be that he should have dropped and stopped handing out wins, but that would be more a critique of the sumo mindset, not Oho specifically. But if he sucks ass at Maegashira 7 or 8 or 9, I'm gonna have a fucking field day. Mitakeumi. Mitakeumi went 2-13 in January 2025, and for a while I figured that's what we'd keep seeing. It wasn't. He hung on and kept it moving. Now it happened again, and the only thing worth talking about is whether his win over Takerufuji or Hiradoumi's win over Kirishima was the most absurd of the basho. Kazuma! These fucking guys are all taking the wind out of my sails. Again, what can I say without just kicking a man when he's down? He may have rolled his ankle against Takerufuji and cratered because of it. I mentioned in the last second channel breakdown that he looked in pain against Asahakuryu and could apply no power. On the other hand, this dude is 450 pounds and was easier to move than me. This is a rare occasion where I hope he was injured, because if this hellscape of a basho was not due to a physical issue, I don't know where he even begins to fix the problems. Okay, the swing picks are next, the ones where some of us score and some of us don't. But before that, I want to point out how close our little competition was after day 14. Taking out the broken wakas, there were 40 points available. The community had 17 points locked in as well as 18 misses. 5 more points were possible, so they had a max of 22. Jason had 16 points locked but also 20 misses. That left 4 for a maximum of 20. I had 15 locked, but like the community, only 18 misses. That left 7 more potential points. So I was in last, but also had a possible max of 22. So how did it turn out? Onosato. I called almost exactly what was gonna happen with Onosato, and no one is more surprised than me. The only difference is that I figured he'd go from 8-4 or 9-3 to 9-6, not 6-6 to 9-6. He was fortunate Kotozakura had no reason to go all out against him, although he'd have been the favorite anyway, and then Kotoshoho was clearly not the version that's taken a couple wins off him. Regardless of how it happened, this is a nice start for the community and I. Kotoshoho. To my own surprise, I find myself inclined to give Kotoshoho some credit. Even though he was probably back to having ankle issues, he still looks better here than he did in the past when this happened at Maegashira 10 or 11 or whatever. I can't take that much credit for getting this pick right, seeing as I viewed him and Atami similarly, which was obviously very wrong, but I will take the point. Aonishiki. I don't think anyone expected Aonishiki to look quite this good, a fact made even more astounding by reports he messed up his big toe on day 8 and just kept grinding out the wins. I mean, Atamifuji's rebirth is astonishing because everything's clicking. Aonishiki's lack of health is the only reason Atamifuji was even able to tie him. This man is absurd. Fujinokawa. Yeah, okay, the idea Fujinokawa might only have 5 wins was obviously silly, but a huge factor in his 8 wins is that both Yokozuna had complete meltdowns while fighting him. Even allowing for Onosato still being mentally disengaged, Hoshoryu straight f***ed it in letting Fuji get away in their match. And before the final 2 matches that took him to the Sanyaku, Fuji's 6 wins came against opponents he was a combined 13-1 against. This is the source of my doubts. The guys he keeps beating will either fall out of range or figure him out, and the guys he has trouble against are, broadly, much more difficult to solve. I'm not hating, he's a lot of fun to watch. I just want everyone to enjoy the ride while it lasts. Takanosho. Yep, that was a Takanosho Basho. There's a reason he has a close to 50-50 record against a surprising number of these guys. If he can figure out how to do the same with the Yokozuna and Ozeki, maybe a winning record at this level wouldn't look so distant. Shodai. Ooh, C- rhymes with chaos sounds good. Fucking dumbass. Okay, he got hurt, but he said it happened when he beat Ura on day 3, after which he went from 1-2 to 4-4. Boy, that's some kind of injury, huh? Obviously, he looked a lot more messed up in the back half of the Basho, but come on. He finds a way to yeet Fuji Ryoga, then 2 days later loses for the first time in 7 to Roga? Gets blown out by Oho, but then turns on the Jets against Daieisho? Shodai giveth, Shodai taketh, far more. Wakamoto Haru. The injury coin to be flipped for Nishikifuji out of bitterness may also be flipped for Wakamoto Haru out of sadness. He started terribly, took the tape off his back, made it to 6-6, then fell to pieces. He had 0 resistance towards anyone's attack by the end. If and when he heals up and is anywhere near capacity again, we'll know by the bodies flying over his head. Your guess is as good as mine as to when that'll be though. Fuji Ryoga. Everyone predicted Fuji Ryoga the same way we did Takayasu, and he nearly overshot our predictions the same way. He's getting comfortable and finding ways to defend his belt while minimizing how long he has to spend actively fighting on the belt. And his match with Roga showed that opponents still have to be a little careful about how they approach a belt fight with him, because if nothing else, he can sure as hell lift and push. Oshoma. Spiff, next time you don't have enough guys predicted to fail, stop and look again, cause Chiyo was an obvious choice here. And the thing is, Chiyo got kinda screwed with his schedule at the end. With 8 losses locked in, he had to fight Kinbozan and Nishikifuji, which didn't help his final record. But watching him fight, every win felt like a surprise. He was putting in the work, sure. I just kept reacting like, oh wow, he won. If only he'd won a little bit more. Kinbozan. This could have been better if Kinbozan had come out with more consistent push. I am not kidding. Maybe Takerufuji still blows through him, and the Shishi fight could have gone either way, but he went straight for the belt against Daieisho and Oshoma, and both had just enough space to turn him and throw or lift him out. Add in the epic brain fart against Wakamoto Haru, and even though Kinbozan fans are probably happy to see a solid winning record, he 100% left double digits on the table. Onokatsu. Are you f***ing kidding me with this shit? Dude, if you don't want to be here, just Kyujo your ass down to the bottom of Juryo and you can be sure to hang out there for a few straight tournaments. I watched this dude grit through May, spin on his heel in all sorts of ways because his foot was still jacked up. Sure, 9 and 6 in Juryo isn't astounding, but given his obvious physical impairments, it was pretty good. Here, Foot didn't look 100%, but it was obviously not as bad. He just didn't have shit for anyone. 2 and 10 with the wins against the two most obviously busted opponents he could ask for. Normal Wakamoto Haru would have escaped him easily. His other win against Asahakuryu, I'm surprised Asahakuryu didn't implode after losing that fight. Props to Jason for the insanely perfect prediction, but F's in the chat for sumo fans exposed to such a shit show. Daieisho. My competitive side wants to be mad because Daieisho landed exactly where I should have predicted him if I hadn't let my theories get away from me. But realistically, he was exactly what we should have expected. He was 6 and 6 with all his losses to guys who were hardcore storming the castle, 5 wins against guys riding front row on the struggle bus, and then Kinbozan because of course Kinbozan. How he managed to lose to Tobizaru, Oshoma, and Shodai to finish baffles me. But it probably shouldn't. I did say he was liable to have a meltdown, and this might be how it looks when that only happens near the end. And finally, Asakoryu. On the one hand, on paper, this is pretty much how I'd expect Asakoryu to look at the bottom of Makuuchi. On the other hand, he did this with a damaged ACL. His mobility was compromised at times, mainly under pressure, but when he was free to move, he looked pretty much like he usually does. How that plays out when he moves up in rank and more opponents are able to apply that pressure, we shall see. For July though, I'd say his fans have good reason to cheer, especially with that outstanding move to beat Fujiryoga on the final day. Also cheering, I presume, is the community, who officially finish a complete blowout of Jason and I. And that is the tier list recap for July 2026. Miracle Worker Aonishiki is back in the Ozeki saddle, taking another ride towards Yokozuna. Given the state of his feet, I imagine he wishes the saddle was more literal, but this way everyone else has a chance. Atamifuji is finally on the Ozeki run fans hoped for years ago. Kirishima will get yet another chance to shed the choker label he's been busy applying to himself, and maybe at least one Yokozuna will be healthy in September. It is truly a time to dream big. As for the tier list competition, yeah, the community absolutely smoked Jason and I. Considering the number of extreme records, which usually skews the hell out of these predictions, I think we all did pretty well, but I'm still on the hook for some cash. So alongside any and all other comments, leave some ideas for charities you'd like to see get my money. The last one was Doctors Without Borders, so this one should at least be different from that. Aw man, am I really gonna do a Shishi breakdown? I think I am. I'm really aiming for a 10 to 15 minute vid though, not an epic, but once I get talking, you know, who knows. In any case, keep an eye out for that, join the Discord, have a great day, and I'll see you soon.